18 verses in the 3rd chapter of Esther. But first, before we start reading through, I just wanted to give you a little context. This is where the main plot of Esther kind of starts to work its way out. Okay, the first 2 chapters kind of set the scene. They set the whole context of everything. What's going on? Why Esther's even a big deal? And we get introduced to a certain key amount of people here. So you get to introduce the king. Can anyone remember what the king's name is? You can go for the short name if you want. Xerxes. Awesome. There was a guy, there was an uncle or something like that to Esther. Who was that? What was his name? Go for it. Mordecai. Awesome. So, and then there was this extra person who kind of came in at the end there. In the second chapter, 19 to 23, a guy called Haman or Haman, whichever way you want to pronounce it. I'm not going to be precious about that. But anyway, there is a big contrast in the way Mordecai is looked at. And what's up?
Is this the Xerxes that attacked Sparta?
See, this is exactly what I knew was going to happen. I was going to bring this up. That was a question I asked last
week. He
lost,
by the way, so...
There you go. That's cool. Now that question's on YouTube. There you go. So, basically, Haman or Haman, or whatever you want to call him, he gets rewarded and promoted, even though we work out that he's actually not that good of a guy, really. Would you be able to run out and turn off that TV? Is that okay? There's a controller at the front desk. It's super loud. So, Mordecai, good guy, right? Mordecai's a good guy. Haman's a bad guy. Haman's the one that gets rewarded. Mordecai's the guy that actually served without getting rewarded. That's kind of sad. I kind of see that and you kind of go, actually, they're not being treated fairly there. Sometimes when I ask my boys to do something, this is what typically happens. I say, hey boys, can you tidy up the Lego for me? And then the boys will run over there and they'll start tidying up, and sure enough, Kyle will just kind of sit down in the corner and put like one piece away at a time. Whereas Army's like scooping armfuls in and just throw it in. And I'm like, did you both do it? And they're like, yeah, we did. And then Army will be like, yeah, I did as much as I could. And Kai's like, yeah, I did as much as I could. But really, one's being rewarded unfairly because he didn't do as much as the other one, right? In this situation, Haman was being rewarded, and we're going to read about what happens as part of his reward in the first opening verses of chapter 3. And Mordecai's kind of being ignored. He's being pushed aside and just being like, hey, you helped me out, good job, thanks. Go away. I've got my main guy now. So, I wanted to kind of give you a little context there about what's happening and how it flows forward. And we're going to jump into the 5 kind of sections I've got here for you. So, the first section is Haman's promotion and then rejection. And that sounds kind of funny because it sounds like he gets promoted and then he gets rejected by everyone. But really it's like one person's rejection towards Haman, okay?
After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment?
Next slide. So the king promoted Haman. Okay, he gets pushed up. He gets a top seat there. But the issue here is that Haman was an ungodly man. He wasn't someone who was following with God. He wasn't walking with God. We can read later on in verse 10 in this chapter that the Agagites were typically the enemies of the Jews. The Agagites. What a name. What a family name. What a tribe name. Kind of awkward to say fast. But still, Haman was promoted to supreme authority above all the princes around him. Think about that. Think about chapter 1. And there's been a little bit of time between chapter 1 and chapter 2, chapter 3. There's been time past it. But you think the king really likes his princes. Really likes the governors of the cities around him. Likes to show off. Likes to keep them close. He's then saying, this guy, Haman, is above all of you guys now. The people who I party with, the people who I spend time with, the people who I take advice from. This is the guy now I'm taking advice from. So I think it's kind of crazy that he's been promoted to supreme authority above all the princes, presumably second only to the king. And we can work that out later on because he doesn't have all authority. He has to go to the king to authorize something. But he doesn't go to anyone else in between. He goes directly to the king. So we can work out he's pretty high up in the food chain. Okay? So he has a role that is kind of like chief of staff. Then you've got like the manager on top, like they're the head of everyone else, and only talks to the manager of the place. So Haman was the son of Hammedatha. How did he say it was? Go. Hamadatha, there you go, that's a good one as well, like that. The Agagite, which we can read about, so this is the first thing, Exodus 17. So we can jump back into the Old Testament and we can read about the sworn enemy of Israel for generations. This goes back ages. This kind of headbutting, this attack, this defense, this aggression, sworn enemies. That's a big deal. And there he is, he's promoted above a lot of other people here. But I like to think that God had a reason, a purpose in allowing Haman to be promoted in this situation. And then it kind of brings me to this idea of God uses really unlikely people for his purpose, right? For his plans. It doesn't mean that Haman knew that God was even using him in this situation. But God uses him for a certain thing here. And I love it because I look at it and I think, who here thinks that they're good enough to be chosen by God, to be used by God? None of us. Because it's just the truth. We're not. We all make mistakes. We're all sinners. We all need Jesus. But God still turns around and says, you know what? I love you enough. I love you so much. I love you so much more than you'll ever understand. I'm going to send my son. He's going to take his sins on his shoulders, go to the cross, die, come back again, so you can have life and life in the fullest. I will use you if I want. God's in control. This is the amazing thing about this. So, we read in verses 2 and 3 that the king commanded that all the servants that are in the king's gate to bow down in reverence to the newly promoted Haman. So they all did, and you can think they're all bowing down, and oh, good job, yeah, woohoo! And then there's Mordecai like, nope. And I kind of like that, because the thing is, Mordecai, we know a little bit about Mordecai from chapter 2. We know about his morals. We know about his beliefs. And we understand a little bit more in verses 2 to 6 in a second. We're going to read that. Why he's standing up. And there's a real reason. It's something to do with the Agagites and the history. Okay? It's not just that he doesn't like Haman. It's not that he's like, actually, I've got a real bad leg and I can't bow right now. I'm really sorry. Here's a legitimate reason. But it's enough to make him a bit of a target. So, in verses 2 to 6, we see that Mordecai intentionally defies Haman by not bowing. Even though the king has put him in a position of authority. So even though the king has raised Haman up and said, this is the guy now, everyone's got to respect him, Mordecai's like, no, I don't want him. Sorry. Maybe not sorry. So he did not bow down, he did not revere him, he did not pay homage to Haman. And we know that Mordecai was a Benjaminite, which is awesome to say really fast as well, Benjaminite. And Scott talked about that really well last week, about a little bit of the family line, a little about the history, about where it all came from. So if you need to go back and watch that video again. But with that knowledge, we can work out at least a little bit of why Mordecai would not bow. Okay? No self-respecting Benjaminite would bow before a descendant of the ancient enemies of the Jews. You guys were bad to us. You guys did evil. You guys wiped out families and nations and were just bad. I can't bow. I can't bow because I know who you are. I know where you came from. And that doesn't sound like a very Christian thing to do. But it's just the point of being you're an enemy of God's chosen people. Remember in the Old Testament, in Genesis and Exodus, we read about God's chosen people, the chosen people of Christ, of God, and how he rescued them from slavery and brought them out in Exodus, right? The reason why this is a big deal is because that's God's people who you're oppressing. That's God's people. It's not even just that I'm a Jew, but you're attacking God's people through me. That's a big deal. And then this question is asked, why do you transgress the king's command? What's that?
Isn't that a little unfair?
Why?
He's being held accountable for the crimes of his forefathers.
We're going to work out in a minute that Haman's not not really a good guy. So
I mean, yeah, but still.
but think about that, and that's why I say it's not really a Christian thing to do, because there's a little bit of judgment there. There's a lack of forgiveness. But when you think about history and when you think about how people are treated, there's an understandable view to this as well. If Mordecai would have known the family line there, he's a wise guy. Doesn't mean it's right. But this is the best part about it all as well. We all make mistakes. Mordecai is used in a really great way here, because you get to see a little bit of Christian rebellion, if you will, but also you get to see that even a person who isn't as Christian as you want to be can still be used by God. So even though it might not be the best thing to do to turn around and judge someone because of their past or because of their family, all the way back when, there's still something to be said about God can still use people. Did you know, this is a really funny thing, in some countries you're not allowed to call your kid Adolf. Why? Why?
Hitler.
Oh, but because every kid named Adolf's going to be like Hitler, right? No. But you're putting a judgment to that name. You're letting history play into why that's a bad thing. It's just stuff like that. And that still happens nowadays. There are certain names that you're not allowed to name your kid because there are things attached to those names. So just in that same light, history played in the fact about how Mordecai treated Haman. But Haman was very much not a good guy. So why do you transgress the king's command? Why don't you bow down? Why don't you do that? So I've got a question for you. When is it right for a Christian, one of us, sons and daughters of Jesus Christ, when is it right for a Christian to resist the commands of the world? Anyone got any ideas for that? When is it right for us to resist? What do we think? Anyone got anything? Where's you got anything? What do you think?
Yeah. I'd say anything that's going to cause you to sin. Like, if the world, the government, whoever, people who are in charge want you to do something that is wrong, that the Bible says isn't okay.
Yeah.
Shouldn't do it.
But we're told in the Bible to respect our leaders, right? And pray for them. So that's wrong to not go with everything, right? No, because if you're being pulled away from God into a world of sin, that's where the line is. This is a different question for you, but it's something that we really need to think about. When the world goes against God and tries to get you to go with them instead of with God, that's the line, right? There should be a line in the sand right there. If you haven't got that standard, if you haven't got that line in the sand, we need to work that out. You need to work that out, right? Quite simply, when the world goes against God, that's when the line should be drawn. And we had that. Think about in America, we had do not go to church, because if you go to church, people will die because of COVID, right? And we know that in the Bible it says, don't forget to gather together. Don't forget the gathering together of the saints. Don't forget that. It's a big deal. So there's a respect line because you think, okay. But after a while, people started gathering together again. It wasn't to break the law, but it was because after about half a year, we need to gather back together again because that's what the Bible tells us to do. That's what God's telling us to do. There's a balance in all of this. Not to be completely disrespectful, but to remember what God's asked us to do as well. Okay. Second one, verses 4 to 7. Wounded and prideful Haman. Okay, Aiden, you want to give this one a go? Not Ezra?
Not Ezra.
Perfect. So verses 4 to 7, please.
Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearketh not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matter would stand for. He had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him receive reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shewed him, the people of Mordecai, Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes.
There you go.
Even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Xerxes, they cast pur, that is the lot before Haman from day to day, and from the month to month to the 12th month, that is the day Ard.
The month Adar? Awesome. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. So, first thing that we remember here, need to work out, is Haman didn't actually notice that Mordecai didn't bow down. Instantly, that tells you something about Haman, because he didn't notice this one person standing up. He was kind of like in the limelight, right? Everyone's bowing down with me. This is awesome. This is amazing. Understandable. The guy's just been promoted like second in charge of the whole kingdom. That's crazy. But when you think about what's going on inside of his heart right now, there's a pride. Look where I am and look where you are. Right? And then there's this moment where you go, who is speaking to Haman? They spoke to Haman daily about Mordecai. Daily! It was a big enough thing to them to speak to Mordecai every day until he worked out what was going on. What does that say about Haman? I don't want to be mean, but it doesn't make him sound the smartest guy in the world if he has to get reminded daily of all this stuff. They talked to him. They told him about Mordecai. They were talking into his ear. What about Mordecai? What about this guy that resisted? What about this guy? What about this guy? They were his aides, his supporting cast, the people around him that were just trying to build him up as much as possible and to boost him. They informed Haman. Now, something about Esther, the book of Esther, there's a lot of this. Of these people just coming in, hey, did you see what happened here? Even in chapter 1, we saw it when the king was like, we should probably do something about the queen. And they're like, what about this? What about that? And these people come around him, the smart people, the people that he talks to, his like standard of smart people who need to come in and tell me what to do. This is kind of what's happening here. The people he's surrounding him with aren't giving him good counsel. They're not. But throughout Esther, we see this type of gossiping or this kind of knowledge being passed on in a kind of a gossipy way. Lots of secrecy, lots of, what about this, what about that? Let's make quick decisions. Let's make them with emotion real fast and see what happens next. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. So then after this has been pointed out, Haman noticed in verse 5 that in fact Mordecai did not bow. How can he not bow? Haman, how's it taken you 2 verses to realize that Mordecai hasn't bowed? Quite similar to the king, Haman was filled with wrath. Remember in the very first chapter, when the queen did not show up, the king was filled with anger, rage, wrath. And then Haman was filled with anger, rage, wrath. Because you didn't bow to me? Talk about a power trip, man. You got the rest of the empire to bowing down to you, and you're worried about one guy? But again, this tells you a few things about Haman. He was an extremely proud man, right? But also, he was a very insecure man. The fact that Haman did not punish Mordecai because that was kind of beneath him, right? I'm up here now, I can't be seen punishing one person. Maybe I need to get rid of all of them. Think about how you jump from one decision to that so quickly. That's crazy. He had a position, and I think this kind of feeds into his pride, and feeds into his ego, and feeds into his insecurity. His position mattered so much that even if only one person stood up against him, it was enough to throw him off that he had to get rid of them. It couldn't just be let it blow over and move on kind of situation. It had to be everyone respects me or no one respects me type of situation. And that means that that guy had some problems going on in his heart. And maybe about his own personal value. And then it says, Haman then thought about laying hands on Mordecai, but thought of the bigger picture. Why take out one of them when I can take out all of them instead. All of the Jews. Haman's anger led him to try to take out his wrath on the Jews in the whole kingdom, like every single one of them who identified as a Jew. This exposed part of Haman's heart and his hatred for the Jewish people. Remember, the whole reason why Mordecai was like, I don't want to bow to this guy, one of those reasons could very well have been, because you hate the Jewish people and I'm not going to bow to you. And sure enough, we fast forward 3 verses, and then we've gone from him being promoted to him trying to wipe out a whole nation. That's pretty crazy how fast that turns. And then Haman decided on an exact date for when he would take action against the Jews. In the first month, which is called Nisan, on the 12th year of the king's reign, they cast her. So we can work this out. You can jump into your Bibles. I've got a study Bible I used at home for this, but we can work this out to be March or April in the year 474 BC. Okay, read it a few different places. That's the average year that they kind of measured this out for, which is crazy. So 474 years before Christ. Okay? More than 4 years have come and gone since Esther has been made queen. Okay? So she's in power, but she's not really in power. She's not a big player here yet because she's just not doing much. Which is okay. That's good. The king's pretty power mad. You know, he knows what he wants. But what about casting pur? P-U-R. Pur. Now, pur is basically the same as casting lots. It's like the Persian word for that. And we know this about lots because the soldiers at the foot of the cross cast lots over who gets Jesus' clothes, who gets his things. Let's roll some dice and see who wins this stuff. It's not a very great thing to do, you know. It's very gambling, basically. So they cast lots, and they cast something like dice. It'd have different faces on it, and they'd roll it, and it would be whoever's symbol was facing up there to win. But think about the chances of all of this. How many sides of a dice, an average dice, is there on one die? Anyone know? You're playing Monopoly with one, go for it.
6.
6. So if you're playing with 6 people, what are your odds of winning?
1.
Right?
1 out of 6, I think.
So, yeah. But you think about that. You're leaving everything else up to chance. And this is how they decided to work out when all this stuff would go down with the Jewish people. We're going to play a little game. We're going to roll some dice. We're going to see which month lines up for which side of the dice, and we're going to roll it, and we're going to work out when we're going to attack them and wipe them all out. And it says they started it in the first month, called Nisan, and they cast it until it fell on the 12th month, which is called Adar. So basically they've got 11 months here. From the first to the very last. The first day, from the first day, 11 months right there, to work out what's going on. But we can read the truth in Proverbs 16:33. Proverbs is an awesome book, by the way. You should all be reading it. But the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. This is awesome, by the way. This might not make sense. I'm going to try and make it make sense to you in a second, okay? But this tells us, basically, as soon as that dice has left your hand, actually, no, hold on. Before you've even rolled it, God knows what's going to happen. The lot is cast into the lap, so it doesn't roll away, doesn't roll down some stairs or into a gutter. You keep it in that little box, you keep it on your lap right here, and you roll it into, woo, woo, I got a 6. Well, guess you already knew what it's going to be. God already knew. The verdict is completely up to God. The answer, the outcome, is completely up to God. There is this Hebrew word, Mishpat, which basically means a decision, a verdict, or a disposal, right? But the word tells us about a decision that has been made quite like a judge in a courtroom. Like it's a final decision, guilty, not guilty, that big, serious enough to be that type of decision. That's what we're talking about here. Every time a dice was rolled, boom, 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 decision made. And it was God making those decisions. So as the dice are thrown or rolled, God is deciding a verdict or a mishpat, a decision, on every roll of the dice. Or maybe he's already got it planned out. What do you think? Something to think about, right? Does he already know? Or is he making a decision in that situation? If you get a coin out of your pocket and you flick it, does God know if it's heads or tails or if it's going to land right on the edge? Is he making that decision as it flips through the air? Or has he already made that decision years and years and years ago? It tells you something about God, about what you think about those situations. Whether he's orchestrating everything, or whether it's an off-the-cuff decision right now. Something tells me that God does a lot of orchestrating, and has been doing it so for a long time. I'm really thankful for that. So, for the 11 months that these lots were cast, God knew the outcome, and it kept the Jews in this kingdom safe for that time. Because they could have rolled it and been like, oh, this month, Nisan. Okay, roll it again, see what happens. Oh, tomorrow. Okay, this is going to be quick. But no, God kept them safe for another 11 months. Do you think the Jews knew that they were being kept safe? Do you think they knew what was going on? Well, God knew. I'm really thankful for that. I'm really thankful. We jump to section 3, verses 8 to 9. Haman's proposal to the king. Ufaz, can you read verses 8 and 9, please?
Okay. And Haman said unto King Xerxes, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries.
Okay, so Haman's got a plan. He's got a proposal. And this is where we work out Haman's position. He's not going to anyone else, he's going straight to the king. Okay? And the charge that Haman brought to the king was a really dangerous one because it was full of half-truths. Alright? It wasn't completely true of like, these guys are out to get you. It was kind of like half and half of, they're a little bit disconnected to us. Okay, so yes, here's the half-truth. The Jews were a certain type of people, and it says scattered and dispersed all around. That had happened because of all the battles that happened before. That's why they were scattered and dispersed, right? Babylonians, all the people that came and attacked them, there's a reason why they're scattered and dispersed. It's not just their fault. That's not just where they chose to build their house, right? And then they have their own laws. Well, of course they do, because they're Jews. They're going to obey God's law. But it's not our law. Half-truth. They're scattered, they're dispersed, they're dangerous, they're everywhere. Well, you're not going to tell them the whole truth of why they are. And they have their own laws. That aren't our laws. No, but they're the king's laws. They're God's laws. And their laws didn't actually interfere with them following Xerxes' laws. Apart from Mordecai's right here. This is the first time it seems to have happened. So Mordecai's decision to not bow down was not based on the law of God, but more on personal choice and integrity. So if the Persian laws required the Jewish people to not obey God's laws, then they should have and felt convicted enough to disobey the king's laws to follow God's. That's kind of what we were saying before. If the government's saying do one thing, you do as much as you can to respect it, but as soon as they start trying to get you away from God, there should be a line. And that's what happened to Mordecai. Right? It was his personal integrity, conviction, and belief in God that made him do that. If the law stops you from obeying God's law, then you have an understandable reason to disobey the law in God's eyes. That's what the Bible says. You may very well still get arrested, but and things may not go well for you on earth, but knowing that you've obeyed God's law is a big deal. Haman suggests organizing a mass murder of the Jewish people. Mass murder. When he was leaving, what he's leaving out of the conversation was just how many people in the empire, in the kingdom, who actually were Jewish. There was a lot of them. It wasn't just 5 people. It wasn't just 10 people. It was a lot of people that he's thinking, a blink of an eye, they're gone. Does he tell the king that? No. Does the king know? Why would he know? He's relying on other people to talk to him, to guide him, to help him make decisions. And he's turned to Haman because he's his second in command. And Haman's got this big plan, and I should probably back him. I just promoted him. Didn't you all see the ceremony? And on top of that, Haman was willing to pay 10,000 talents of silver to those who partook in this. But of course, it wouldn't come from Haman's pocket. That's not Haman dishing out silver to everyone else. He's saying, whoever brings property to the king, I will pay you 10,000 out of the king's treasury here. That's what's going to go down. It's kind of sneaky, really, isn't it? But he gets the king to listen to this. And it's going to be paid for by the people who they just killed, businesses, property, and all the other stuff they can get their hands on. It's sad. You know, the most amazing thing that happened during World War I, World War II, and especially during the Holocaust, was when they were clearing out all the Jews to the concentration camps, what did the Nazis do with all the valuable stuff? Well, they kept it. And they took the businesses, and they took them over, and they kept them going. And they sold all the earth, they melted down the gold, and they made things into it. They kept all these incredible paintings. And there's been some incredible discoveries over the last 30 years of people digging down into into certain basements and stuff and being like, whoa, we just hit the jackpot. And it's like, yeah, that was all stolen Jewish treasures from World War II. So this stuff happens. It has happened, and it continues to happen. And we're just seeing now that actually this isn't a new thing. The Bible tells us exactly what people are like. If you can take someone's business and take over it and show us proof that you've taken it, I'll give you 10,000 pieces of silver for that. I'll pay you to get rid of these people. I'll pay you to be a part of this situation. It's kind of like bribery, but it's also kind of like mercenary kind of pay right there, you know? Get rid of these people for me and you'll be paid handsomely. 10,000 pieces of silver, talents of silver, that's crazy money. That's crazy money. So then we get to verses 10 and 11. By the way, this is a crazy plan. This is strange. This is but frustratingly, the king agrees. Verses 10 and 11, the king agrees. Scott, do you want to read that out for us?
Awesome. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee.
Man, I hate that last sentence. So the king hears Haman's plan and takes off his ring, his signet ring.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone know what that means? What that is? Go for it.
It's a big ring that you wear on your pinky, and it usually has an engraving on it that you stamp into a
wax,
seal a letter.
Awesome. So that's perfect. That's like, I've got a picture to show in a second, just in case you guys didn't know of a Persian signet ring. But the king basically gives Haman his signature. You can stamp all the things you need to do with this ring. You have the king's signature now. Imagine that. Someone has stole your identity, they have your license, they have these things. They can do whatever they want in your name now, right? The king just willingly hands it over. You've got my royal signet ring now. You can just do what you want. And Haman's probably like, ooh, what can I do? What can I do? Well, anything now, because no one's going to stop me. The money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. Well, I tell you what's really sad about that sentence right there is, there's nothing good in Haman. Right? Just like there's nothing good in us humans until we know Jesus Christ. Right? We are all bad until we know Jesus. Haman takes this and runs for a mile with this thing. And the ring that was given was the king's signet ring. The face of these rings included an engraving, as I said, that would be used to stamp an image on a document. Usually something about it belongs to this king of this area and this time period. But basically it was just having this signature. It's crazy that the king would just hand it over. So I've got this picture here. Boom, this is a Persian signet ring right here. And all these symbols will basically be saying, this king, this province, this time, and maybe a little description down here would be like his mighty excellence or something like that. But the whole point is, you have that thing, you can send as many letters as you want because it's coming from the king. It's no longer coming from Haman. It's coming from the king. That's a big deal. The king or whoever had that ring Haman in this situation basically could sign any document with the authority of the signature of the king on it. That's a big deal. The money's given to you, you can do whatever you want with it. Haman's given the chance to do whatever he wants with all the money. The personnel he needs, any person that helps you, you can have all the hands you need. Do what you want. And then the king's signature to back all the paperwork, all the politics, all the crazy stuff that could have held him back. I've got the king's signature now. I don't need to talk through anything anymore. And verse 11 ends with the king saying, "Do with them as it seemeth good to thee." That's a sad situation. The king seems more concerned about his reputation and the obedience of his kingdom rather than the understanding and the execution of these plans. It doesn't seem like he's really thought this through, and obviously I wasn't in the room, so I don't know how it went down, but I don't think he thought this through very well.
I don't think he thought about bringing a new queen or figuring her out.
Right? But what did he do instead? Bring my smart people around me and let them make decisions, right? The drunken people in chapter 1, the angry people, the frustrated people, why not listen to them? It's not wise, right? He just promoted Haman into such a high position. How would it look if he didn't even listen to Haman's plans? This is the situation here. I think the king's kind of emotional. I think the king leads a lot with his heart and not so much with his head. I think that the king gets angry and he makes snap decisions backed by all his buddies. I think the king makes decisions on someone doing something, a little bit of work, instead of the person doing a lot of work. You see that with Mordecai and Haman. Who should have got the promotion? The guy who did the work, Mordecai. But who did get the promotion? Well, Haman, the guy that did minimal. And that's the difference here. The king does snap decisions that don't make sense. How about you guys? Are you trying to rely on God's wisdom and understanding and love and mercy to lead you? Or are we making snap decisions just to get through life as fast as possible? Because there's a way to do this and there's a way to do this well. Okay? So the king's trust that he shows in Haman is kind of crazy. He gives people, he gives the money, and he gives the political power to do as he sees fit, or as he sees that it is good. Right? The king gives Haman the power to execute decisions with no real boundaries anymore. It's kind of giving him everything. And we get to our final section here, verses 12 to 15. The decree is published. Brooklyn, would you mind reading that for us? Is that okay? 12 to the end there. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants.
Yep.
Okay. And to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of
You're good, you good?
of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, in the name of the king Ahasuerus,
Perfect.
was it written and sealed with the king's ring.
Awesome. Stop right there. So we have basically that section right there. Just this idea of what's happening here is the scribes are being called in. They're all having their envelopes punched by the king's ring again. What we just talked about with the politics and the power of that signet ring is just come right into play. And that's kind of scary that as soon as it's agreed upon, boom, it's into production. Let's get this thing rolling out, okay? Verse 13, and the letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given into Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city, Shushan, was perplexed. There's a lot of things going on in this section right here. Brooklyn, thank you for reading that. So the scribes were called in on the 13th day of the first month, And they were called in to write this new decree, to get it written down, to get it going. Let's roll, let's roll. We've got the agreement from the king. We've got the green light. Let's move, move, move. On the 13th day of the first month, on the day before the Jewish Passover in 474 BC. That's a real significant thing. Because what are the Jews going to be doing? Anyone got any ideas?
Passover,
What's Passover?
the time where we give thanks to God
Okay, for what reason?
for his for him dying on the cross, but it hasn't happened yet. So
You want to help them out?
It's Passover was when they were in Egypt, and the angel of the Lord came over and wiped out all the firstborn.
Yeah. So they're celebrating the fact that God looked after them. God took care of them. Okay? But it was a celebration. It's a festival. It's a time of celebration, thankfulness to God. So it's real significant it's happening the day before that happens, because the Jews aren't going to be around. They're going to be doing their own thing. The decree is sent out to all the major government leaders in the Persian Empire that the Jewish people will be destroyed all on the same day. Same day. So timeline-wise, Haman managed to, 1, secure an appointment with the king. Go and talk to him. 2, draw up a decree in the king's name. 3, with the signet ring, had it all signatured, signed up, stamped, ready to go. Then his decree was quickly dispersed throughout the whole empire. In chapter 1 we talked about that relay that they did with horses to get all the notices taken out and pushed out as far as they can. That's the same type of situation here. It describes a hastiness of getting this decree out as fast as possible. This genocide of the Jewish people was planned in February or March in 473 BC, so the following year. The decree was sent out about 11 months before it was planned. It would have taken about 3 to 4 months for this decree to reach the whole empire. Because remember, we can read about in chapter 1 and in chapter 2, the vastness of this empire is huge. It talks about from one place to the next place. I want to urge you to kind of read that, just to get the idea of how far these horses have to run, just to get this decree out.
122 provinces or something.
100, yeah, it's huge. Over 120 provinces, yeah, massive. But in chapter 1 specifically, it talks about this country, and this country, and this country. This decree was translated into all languages so that everyone would understand exactly what's going on. It was signed and sealed and delivered with the name of the king on it. It's a real big deal. To destroy, to perish, the young and the old, the children and the women in one day. What a sad decree. Imagine that. Imagine if the president tomorrow sent out a decree for all Americans to do something like that. There would be an uproar, right? Are you kidding me? Kill all women and children? And that's the thing. We read at the end of this verse that people are perplexed by how fast this stuff is going through. Because people don't see it the same way. An empire-wide death sentence being distributed to wipe out all the Jews, announced by Haman, supported by the king. And it was announced 11 months before it was going to happen. What would you guys do? What would you guys do if you got told, hey, Ubaz, in 11 months' time, I'm going to come to your school and I'm going to fight you? What would you do?
Go get a gym membership.
Right? get prepared, right?
Yeah.
What if someone tried to invade America and they're like, Russia called and they said, hey, 11 months' time on this day, this is what's going down. What would America do? They'd start training, right? They'd probably try and work out something to attack first. There's an 11-month heads up going on for the Jewish people here, saying, by the way, this is what's going to happen. Notices posted around in all the different places in the empire, different translations so everyone would understand. You don't think a Jewish person is going to read that? And then to take all the spoils, take all the things, that's prey, it says. That's prey. Like you're a predator attacking something, taking what you want so you can survive. Very animal-like. So the post of the decree went out, and in verse 15 we can read that the king and Haman sat down and had a drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Because typically when the king had drinks, it was a celebration of some kind. You can work out, he likes to throw a party in chapter 1. It was to do with his queen and had all the people over. The women had a party over here, the guys had a party over there. And it lasted a really, really long time. This guy liked to party. He liked to drink. But there's a strange reception to this decree. The whole city was perplexed. The citizens of the empire were confused, taken back maybe. The word perplexed, though, that's like a stronger meaning, right? There were Jewish people all over the cities, all over the empire, and they're going to wipe them all out? This is weird. What's going on here? Well, what's going on here is people are being identified as enemies who aren't really enemies. They're just standing for something different. Okay. Nowadays, when the truth is present, meaning when the gospel of Jesus Christ is presented, and when you live and say things differently to the rest of the world, you are a threat to the way of the world. We can read in the Bible, it talks about the Lord of this world, right? That's Satan, that's the devil, that's the bad guy, right? And when we stand up against him and we represent Jesus Christ, we are then labeled the enemy. Why do you think people get so aggressive when you come up to them and say, Jesus loves you, and they come back and, oh, they're cursing at you, and they throw stuff, or they, just really angry at you? Why? I gave you something positive. I'm telling you someone loves you, and you're attacking me back. Well, because you're the enemy. You're standing up for something that I know is bad. It's a bad thing. And you're like, no, it's not. It's good. Well, how can it be? Because blah, 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 blah. And they come back and they attack and they argue and they shout and they scream and they swear. And you're going, I just want you to know that Jesus loves you. Because when you're representing the truth, when you're representing Jesus Christ, when you're standing in front of people who are trying to pull you away from that, you are then the enemy. And you see that. And you see that happen all over the world. Different countries, different nationalities, different places, different schools. In different situations, you're not allowed to do certain things now if it's representing Jesus. Why? Because it's threatening. Because you're then an enemy. Because you're representing the truth. Jewish people are just trying to follow God's law. Jewish people are just trying to be good Jewish people. But because they were acting the way they were, because they were being who they were, well, you're the enemy now. And Haman saw that and he wanted to get rid of them. And that's Esther chapter 3 right there. It kind of leads into the next big thing. That's next week. We're going to end Esther chapter 4 next Wednesday. But I'm going to leave you with a couple of points in a second. But has anyone else got anything they want to say? Any other things they've been thinking about? Anything they kind of pulled out as you're reading through? Anything that kind of made it no sense, made a little sense, made all the sense? Any ideas? Wes, have you got anything for us? Any nuggets? No. You good? Scott?
You mentioned about how he was very easily persuaded. And we catch that from a historian by the name of Herodotus. Actually wrote a lot about King Xerxes.
Oh, yeah.
And he explained a lot that he was very easily moved by his princes.
Yeah.
Like he didn't stand well on his own. He would just, whatever way the wind would blow,
Yeah.
he would go. And so it's kind of, you landed right on that. Just, what do I do? And everyone's like, oh, do this. Okay.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't think for himself.
And there's a big deal with Xerxes. When he invaded Greece, there's this huge battle that he went for. And he had a massive army. 120 plus provinces, and he's pulling all the young men in to go and fight. That's a massive army. But you know what? When he went against Greece, there was this big battle, and he decided to talk to his princes more than understanding the battle itself. The princes ummed and ahed. He ended up losing the battle, even though he had the biggest army in the world. That's a historical thing. You can read about that, but that's a good point. Being swayed by the people you put around you. Are the people around you good? Who fast?
At one point in the Battle of Greece, he had his men start whipping the Mediterranean Sea.
Why is that? To tame it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would stop being stormy so his
So
fleet
stormy.
could get across.
Right?
Xerxes was fun.
He's a great guy. He was a great tactician when he actually was able to focus on stuff. That's how he managed to take over half the world. You know, it was already kind of there, but he reinforced it. But when you realize this guy didn't think very well on his own, that's a big problem. When we live in our lives right now, you need to be able to stand on your own and understand what you believe and why you believe it, and know where your lines are. Because when it comes to that point, are you an enemy? Are you a good guy? Are you standing for the truth? Like, what's going on here? Well, you're going to realize that you're probably standing on your own. And people are coming to look at you and understand you and judge you. When that happens, that's a real tough thing. But knowing that you can make those decisions, knowing that you know who Jesus Christ is, knowing that you know who you're representing, is a really big deal. And that's a couple of the questions I have here for you. When is it right for Christians to go against the commands of the world? We've already kind of hammered that. But it's another good question. When is it right for us to stand up? When is it right? Where's your line? Okay, imagine a beach, imagine sand. Here's the world's view, here's God's view. Where's your line? When do you cross? Should you ever cross? Who are you standing for? Mordecai stood for Jesus. Mordecai stood for God. When a guy who slaughtered his family and everything like that, he stood up. He didn't bow down. Who are you standing for? What's your standard? Okay, second question here. Who are you representing? You representing the king of the country or the president or anything like that? If you ask me, it would be like when I lived back in England, am I representing the Queen? What am I doing with the Queen? She's pretty high up in England, but I don't know her. I'm not representing her. I'm representing Jesus. I kind of hope she knows him. But are you representing the king of this world, or are you representing the King of Heaven? The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one who wins. I'm just saying, it's kind of one of those things of, who are you representing? When is it good to stand up? And how are you seen in this world? That's a strange question. But how are you seen? Are you seen as someone who just floats on by? That really easily just floats on by and just, oh, it's cool, the world's changing, I'm going to keep changing with the world. Guess who didn't change with the world? Guess who stayed the same the whole time? Guess who's unchanging? That's God. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's what the Bible tells us. Jesus didn't just change his views and his teaching to go with the world. He attacked that teaching. He tried to change people's mindsets about teaching. He didn't just go with the flow. That's why people didn't like him. That's why they eventually killed him. Because he was teaching something that was against what the world wanted. Okay, so how are you seen in this world? Are you seen as someone who just floats on by? Or are you seen as someone who is standing up? Who's a threat to the way of this world? Because of the truth that you're representing. Do people know you as a Christian? Or do they know you just as you? Because Jamie on his own is just representing Jamie. And I'm not that good. I'm really not. I make a lot of mistakes. I do a lot of things wrong. But Jamie representing Jesus Christ has been forgiven, has been embraced, is a citizen of heaven, knows exactly where he's going when he's going to pass away, can celebrate the fact that my Jesus rose again from the grave after taking all of my sin onto his shoulders and dying for me, but also for you. That's who I'm representing. A God that doesn't just sit around and do nothing, the God of everything. Right? So who are you representing? How are you seen in this world? And when is it right for us to go against the commands of this world? These are all questions I want you guys to think about. We're going to pray in a second. But I just want you to think about, where's your line in the sand? Where is it when people make you cross? Would you be willing to give up a friendship? Would you be willing to go aggressively and talk to them about Jesus? Would you be willing to step out and confidently tell them where they're going wrong? Because there's got to be a line for everyone. Where's your line in the sand as well? For Mordecai, it was Haman being put up there, second in command, and understanding that guy had a past and that guy was angry and aggressive and evil. I can't bow to that guy. I'm going to represent God and God's people